Hey guys, it's Sandro here, with another full detailing video today, this time on the iconic Holden Commodore SS Ute. The car's been fully cleaned, decontaminated and masked up, and we'll jump into this stage of the detail by having a good look at the condition of the paint. Now it's a flat red or non-metallic paint that does show defects pretty well, so hopefully you can see that there is quite a lot of wash-induced swirls, a bit of light oxidation and a distinct haze in the finish. But the most obvious defect that's almost all over the surface of the paint is a uniform layer of marring caused by clay in the vehicle, which is actually why the car was brought to me. I'm not going to go into all the specific details of what the owner used to decontaminate the paint and how he went about it, but to cut a long story short, he was really horrified to see the state of his paint after chemically treating and claying it, and came to the conclusion that the products he had purchased and used were at fault and had etched his paint. Now I had nothing to do with the products he used, however his claims of the products etching and staining the paint were inaccurate. And what actually happened was that the claying process had marred his soft paint, which incidentally is completely normal after claying softer paints, and usually quite easy to rectify with just a light polish, which I also explained. Now the fact that he had jumped to the wrong conclusion wasn't the frustrating part, as we all sometimes get it wrong. And it's also important to note that the owner is a nice guy, loves his ute, which is his weekend driver, and looks after it extremely well. But it's just a fact that he wouldn't accept that the products weren't to blame, and that the paint didn't have chemical etchings, but rather clay marring, nor did he accept that his paint was in fact soft. As he went on to explain that a good friend of his, who is apparently one of the country's best spray painters, told him that the factory paint on his ute is hard, and it was pretty clear that nothing I said was going to change that. In the end, as a detailer providing a service, it's not my job to convince someone of the truth. But it's a little unfair or unjustly to blame a product on the misinformed circumstances, and what's more, it'll help the owner in the future to understand the true factors and avoid similar issues down the track. The other issue was that in his mind, the paint was perfect, apart from the clay marring, which in all honesty, the clay marring would have been the easiest thing to remove, and the deeper swirls and defects would take a lot more work. I really hope this isn't coming across as a negative rant, but I just come across so many similar circumstances where people are quick to condemn or blame a product, when in fact it's not the product's fault, but rather misinformation and improper technique that's the real culprit. There was a little more frustration with this detail and the customer's state of mind and response, but I'll touch on that a little later and focus now on correcting this paint. After measuring the paint's thickness, I could see that there was some pretty significant inconsistencies in the thickness. But this is actually common with Holden utes in my experience, and there was nothing to suggest that it's not all original paint. But more so, perhaps an inconsistency in how the paint is laid down, or aggressively sanded and compounded to address blemishes in the paint by the factory. In any case, there was more than enough clear coat to safely correct the paint, at least overall. Now, unfortunately, during the editing stage of this video, I discovered that my camera wasn't recording during the test section phase, where I found my working combination of pads, compounds and technique, so I do apologise. But I'll talk you through the process, my findings and results. combination was Concour's Precision compound on the Lake Country Blue HDO foam pad for the first cutting stage, followed by Finesse polish on the Lake Country Orange HDO pad for the second finishing stage. And many of you will know that this is perhaps my most used combination, as it just seems to work for me extremely well time and time again. There is absolutely no ifs or buts about this paint being quite soft. And that doesn't mean that every Holden of this era has soft paint, because I know that it doesn't, but this one certainly does. Now in truth, I was able to remove pretty much all the clay-induced marring with just a light polish and pad. However, it did not remove the slightly deeper swirls. I tried a few different combinations, some of which were using Shell Concepts compounds, including S20 Black, which is a medium or one-step compound, with quite a few light cutting to finishing pads, as well as a few CarPro and Ribbers compounds, polishes and pads. But in the end, no matter how I adjusted my technique, there was no way of achieving enough cut and still getting a perfect finish with any one stage or one step correction process. I've talked about this in past videos, but ideally if you can remove a paint's defects and finish down perfectly with just a single combination, that's always the best scenario. However, sometimes there is just no getting around that 2 or even more stages are needed, which was the case here. This comes down to the existing defects and paint type itself. Because of the more moderate swirls, oxidation and haze, a light polish and pad just isn't going to remove them to an acceptable level. And because the paint is so soft, any combination that is aggressive enough to remove those defects isn't going to finish down well without leaving compounding haze and marring. If I really wanted to, and if I was a different detailer with different standards, I could have just removed the clay marring and left the swirls in place, which is really what the customer asked for. But I'm not that detailer, and sometimes what someone asks for and what they expect are two very different things, at least based on my experience anyway. Now, because it was a softer paint type, I didn't need to resort to using more aggressive microfiber or wool pads, or using longer and more aggressive machine polishing techniques, as all that would have done was remove a lot more clear than was necessary, and created a lot more work for me in the second refinement stage. I have quite a few videos now that show the best way to approach softer paints, but overall heat is your worst enemy. So try to avoid longer working cycles with your polisher, or high machine speeds and pressure. And just remember that softer paints are quick paints in relation to being affected by your approach. And the key is that your approach needs to be light-handed, or they can become a real nightmare to correct. So just to summarise on my technique, I use the gear-driven Rupes Mille polisher for the larger areas of the paint, which again seems to be the large polisher I keep reaching for, and the ShineMate Mini DA for the smaller sections and thinner panels. I just used light pressure and stuck to a maximum of 3 to 4 row passes, but you may see that I work slightly larger areas than normal, which is purely based on the paint being softer and allowing me to increase my work area or section and still achieve great levels of correction. Now if this was an extremely hard paint, you would have seen me do the complete opposite and work even smaller sections than normal. And if it was a horribly soft and sensitive paint, you'd probably see me reduce my work section in the final polishing stage, use less product and work with very quick and short polishing cycles. I just bring these points up to try and explain that every paint is different. It's not just about it being hard, medium or soft. In fact, some hard paints can be sensitive and some soft paints really aren't. I know that many of you just want advice on which combination or even technique you should use, but all the advice in the world can't replace or address the results that you see on the paint, and that's the only way you can discover what combination and technique works and is best. I've worked on countless Holden Commodores in the past. Some have been soft paints like this one, most of them have been medium paints, but some have been truly rock hard. So all I'm trying to say is that even with all the experience in the world, all you can do is take an educated guess, but the paint will be what the paint will be, and that can really be anything, and the same goes for every car manufacturer on the planet. So with all that aside, which I hope wasn't too much rambling, I used this two-stage combination with the polishing techniques I just discussed to give this well looked after Holden SSU the level of correction and perfection it deserved. Needless to say, I spent a lot more time than I should have, at least from a business perspective, restoring the paint to what I hope you'll be able to see in the end was really beyond what it ever would have looked like even when it was new from the factory. But as many of you may know, these cars have come to an end, and they really are the last in a long line and history of Aussie muscle cars. So with all the correction work completed, the car was placed into the protection bay and was given its first ever ceramic coating in the way of Nova Evo glass coating. Now this is something that the customer was actually really excited about, as he'd never ventured beyond a wax in the past, and although he'd heard about ceramic coatings, they were still a little unknown to him. I'm not going to go over the process of applying Nova Evo, as it's already there on many videos on this channel, and I don't want to keep repeating myself. But the quick info about Evo is that it's a slower flashing and curing coating, has a super easy and forgiving application, it's extremely durable and chemical resistant, and in a nutshell, it's a pro-grade coating available to the general public. Now, I touched on being a little frustrated with this detail at the beginning of the video, as it's just a little hard to know the truth about something and have it dismissed due to misinformation or stubbornness. However, I guess the frustration on my part continued a little after the car was completed and picked up, as although the customer was really happy with the result, it kind of hinted that it was basically back to the same condition it was before the clay and chemicals damaged it. Now, I'm running a business, and what really matters is that the customer is happy and that I get paid, which was definitely the case. But there is a part of me, if I'm being completely honest, that was a little shocked and disappointed that he really believed that his ute was only as good as it was before the clay damage, and that he couldn't appreciate just how far it had really come and how much work and time went into that. But maybe it was an error on my part, going a little above and beyond, as it seemed as though the extra work and results was done in vain. Maybe I'm sharing and saying a little too much here, so I'll leave it there and let you guys decide what you think, and how this beautiful SSU came up in the end with the final shots. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. Please like, comment and subscribe to this channel to show support for these videos, and I'll see you guys soon. you.